In the dungeon where the assassin was detained, Ratil arrived. She then asked if the interrogation has started. The soldier then replied to Her Majesty, "I have not done it yet, Your Highness." Ratil then questioned the soldiers, "How did you catch him? You said there were no traces of him." "That Majesty," the soldiers were having hard times coping up with Ratil's questions as they walked into the dungeon. The guard rolled his eyes with an embarrassed expression. Ratil again asked them, "Why? How did you catch him?" Then one of the soldiers answered in their whispered voice, "Your Majesty, he confessed." The soldier was not able to finish his phrase when Ratil cut him. "A confession?" Ratil was shocked why a man confessed in assassinating the Emperor. Ratil then said, "It is suspicious. Let's go at once." Every time Ratil took a step into the stone dungeon, the heels and stones create an untimely clear sound. It was a sound that did not suit the gloomy prison, but the prisoners who heard this sound were silent for a moment. Ratil went down to the assassin. The perpetrator was tied to a chair in the middle of the second floor. Even just seeing the silhouette from a distance of the suspect, Ratil then felt rage in his mind. "That is the one who killed my father." Ratil stiffened her expression and walked slowly. "If he really killed my father, I could see the criminal's face clearly as I approached him," Ratil murmured to herself. However, Ratil was puzzled. She saw the perpetrator to be terrified. She wondered what kind of idiot he came to make this confession. Ratil questioned the assassin, "Is it you? Did you confess that you murdered His Majesty?" When Ratil's eyes met, the man looked a bit startled, but then nodded his head hastily. "Yes, I did it." Ratil was given a chair by one of the guards, then asked the criminal, "Really? You did it?" The criminal, who received the gaze, mumbled in an unsure voice, "I really am who did it." Not only in appearance, but in personality as well, he was not like an assassin. Ratil could not believe that a sky broke through numerous guards and killed her father. Ratil narrowed her eyes and became more suspicious. Maybe this man was threatened by the real criminal and confessed instead. Ratil was having muddy thoughts in her mind. However, Ratil was confused on what kind of threats this suspect received to make him confess that he is the Emperor's assassin. The culprit lowered his gaze as if Ratil's gaze was burdensome. Still, Ratil stared intently at him and asked, "How did you do it? How did you kill my father?" At the dull voice and expressionless face of Ratil, goosebumps rose on the neck of the criminal. Ratil looked at the culprit, barely blinking. When the criminal hesitated to speak, the guard grabbed the criminal's head and lifted him up. The suspect then uttered, "Everything I did with a dagger." The culprit repeated, "I stabbed him with a dagger." Then Ratil asked again this time, "Where?" The suspect bowed his head and whispered, "His heart." Ratil, without hesitation, asked him, "Is it instant death?" The criminal responded, "Yes, yes," while his fingers were trembling. To talk about his father's death so casually, thinking that she is really crazy. Ratil knew that the common people did not know how the Emperor was killed, because it was not announced. Most of the people thought the Emperor was poisoned, but he was actually stabbed to death by a dagger. Ratil thinks that the man is related to the real criminal. Ratil then asked the suspect, "How did you get into the Imperial Palace?" The criminal answered, "We just jumped over the fence and moved away from people's eyes." Ratil suspiciously made an inquiry to the suspect, "Are you strong enough to do that?" Ratil also asked, "Do you know how many eyes are guarding this place?" The criminal answered, "There's 52 guards stationed for 3 shifts." Ratil then asked again, "Do you know the number of girls when you sneak into the bedroom?" The culprit responded, "There was no one in the room." The criminal looked at Ratil's eyes, murmured in a crawling voice. The criminal then said, "It is not a bedroom, it's an office." Ratil frowned and answered, "I'm not fooled." Ratil, though hearing those statements from the criminal, still couldn't understand and has some doubts. Ratil then confusingly asked again the criminal, "Why did you confess? Do you know what happens to the Emperor's assassin?" Ratil then explained, "I'd rather be punished so painfully as to beg for death. You can't be at ease after you die." Ratil detailed her feeling towards the criminal's confession. Ratil continued to tell the criminal, "Your family will be executed in extreme cases, or slaves at the most generous." The criminal started to get worried, as Ratil told him more, "You can even find all the relatives you don't know and will be included in your punishment as well." The criminal's face turned pale. Ratil twisted the corners of his mouth and gave a cold laugh. Ratil, still not finished and satisfied, put fear in the criminal's heart as she said that even friends and lovers can be punished because of what he has done. The killer is now shaking in fear. As Ratil looking down on him who couldn't even speak properly, Ratil asked again, "But after all this, why did you confess?" Ratil seriously stared at the suspect and she is wondering about his intentions. The criminal bowed his head, tears can be seen in his eyes. But what is more obvious is he was scared of what he heard from the Empress Ratil. Ratil, who had interrogated the supposed assassin, gave instructions as she went out of the dungeon. "Lord Cernot, tie his hands loose, and let him escape on his own." Sir Cernot, who was following Her Majesty Ratil from behind, was surprised with the order.